Mozilla Hacks, an interview with Trevor Smith, the WebXR community lead. Okay, welcome. So, hello everyone. This is my friend Trevor Smith. You might see him on Twitter as Trevor Flowers, which I assume that must be your middle name, right? Trevor F. Smith?
Yeah, the F, it means different things at different times. Right now it means flowers, so I'm Trevor Flowers.
It's good to have something that changes all the time. And your child is named Sparks, right?
Yeah, my daughter's name is Sparks, and it's one of those names where it's sort of bimodal. People are either like, "Oh, that's awesome," or "Why would you do that?"
I think it's awesome.
She is definitely a Sparks
She's
when you meet her. Totally
right. Cool. So you are one of my coworkers at Mozilla. Can you tell us a little bit about your role at Mozilla?
Yeah, so I am in the mixed reality team, and the team as a whole works on augmented reality and virtual reality for the web. And so one of the products that is sort of the most public product at this point is WebVR, which is an API where people can build web pages that can be rendered into a headset so that you can see 3D worlds on the web.
And that's been out for a couple of years, right? Or at least in beta. I don't know if it's been official.
Yeah, so I think it was shipped in Firefox for general usage a little less than a year ago.
Cool.
And it's in other browsers too. So it's in Chrome and Behind a Flag, and it's in Samsung Internet, and Edge has an implementation of it.
So I remember, I think about WWDC last year, Apple announced ARKit, and Google had been experimenting with what was called Tango. And so that was kind of augmented reality, and that was separate from VR. So what happened that we now have WebXR?
Right. So WebXR is this term that is it basically encompasses all of augmented reality and virtual reality and everything in between. So it's a whole spectrum of mixing of these different capabilities. And so yeah, about a year ago, the augmented reality side of the spectrum started getting a lot of attention and a lot of excitement around it because both Android and iOS suddenly had these new capabilities where using just the camera, they could actually dynamically map the environment, so they could find surfaces and like the floor or tables or walls, and allow people to stick or anchor content to those surfaces. And so that enabled this whole set of fun experiments where people are making games and room measuring tapes and just basically figuring out like what is it like to have the ability to sense the world in 3D and stick virtual things in it.
So sensing really seems to be the difference. AR isn't just putting something on top of the real world, but actually sensing the real world so you can put it on top in some interesting way.
Yeah, there's a couple pieces to it. There's the process of figuring out like where the device is, and then in addition to that, there's the world mapping aspect where it's the application, if it's given permission, has access to, okay, we see a sofa over there, so you can put a virtual character sitting on it. We see a floor over there, so you can have cats running around on it, that sort of thing. So there's kind of the two pieces that people are using right now.
Cool. Now, it strikes me as a potential problem if we go to an arbitrary web page, that web page now has access to the pixels of the world around me. What are we going to do about that?
Yeah, right. That would, if we just let every web page have access to the camera and a map of your home, that would be a problem. That would break the contract, the mental contract that people have with the web. If you go to a web page, the web page has to ask permission to have access to camera, or it has to access to have position or have access to world sensing data. And so the user, in the same way that it asks you to have access to your webcam, it will ask you if you want to let the web page have access to that other data. Because I think that's a big differentiator between that and native apps. With native apps, most people just sort of assume that, well, I'm installing the app, it wants these things, so go ahead and let it do it. And then it
Right.
has those permissions for the entire time the app is installed.
Right.
With web pages, on the web, we do it a little bit different. We give the user more control, more understanding of what it is they're sharing.
So now I have to ask, what does the X stand for? Because I hear augmented reality, virtual reality, mixed reality, cross reality, maybe?
Yeah, there are several different opinions on what the X stands for. The one I think that is the most simple is the X is like a variable. So, in middle school, when you did algebra, you have these variables that can stand for any number, X or Y or Z. So XR it's basically any reality. And so in that way, it's sort of non-controversial because it can cover anything along the spectrum,
right,
from real, actual reality all the way to fully virtual reality and everything in between. There are all sorts of mixed versions where it's not fully augmented reality and it's not fully virtual reality. So one of the examples is if you go into a headset that does cover up your vision and you're looking around, but it has forward-sensing cameras, it can do the same thing as the phone. It can map the environment if you want it to. And so while you're in a virtual space, it could show you a physical version of something that's in the physical space. Like the simplest case is it could show you the outline of a sofa if you're about to walk into a sofa. So you can mix in world sensing with virtual spaces. So it's definitely a spectrum.
Okay, so there is a W3C standards group or body for WebXR, right?
Yeah, so the way it is working right now is that there's a community group and we're forming a working group. And so they're both under the W3C umbrella. And so the community group is where we incubate all of the ideas. And that's the group of people who came up with the WebXR device API. That's the current sort of API that we're putting together to replace WebVR. But now that it's far enough along and it's starting to really stabilize and look like it's the general shape of what we think the final spec will be, what we're doing is we're forming the working group, and that's the group of people who will take it through the W3C standards process.
Right.
And so at the end of that, it will become a recommendation, and at that point, it's a standard that people can rely on going forward.
And this is really a bunch of different companies all working together, right? I mean, there's not just the browser makers, because I think Amazon's there too now.
No, WalletCheck from Amazon is there. And then we have people from Samsung, we have people from Google, we have people from Mozilla, we have people from Intel, Apple, Microsoft, Magic Leap just joined, which is a great
awesome.
sort of milestone for us. And so yeah, so we have basically most of the organizations who are involved with making the future of augmented reality and virtual reality and have some part to play on the web are showing up and making sure that this is a standard that's solid and usable over the next decade.
Right.
A bit.
So if I'm a web developer and I want to build a little experimental website, how would I do that today?
There's basically two paths that I usually recommend to people. If you are a web developer who mostly works in HTML and CSS, like you're a front-end developer who's not heavy on the JavaScript side, A-Frame is a really good entrance to the field. So it's a markup-oriented library. You pretty much just put a script tag into your page, and then you use markup to define a three-dimensional scene. And then you can just go into VR and see it working immediately. Like you could get up and running in 15 minutes. If you're primarily a JavaScript coder and you have a little bit of 3D experience, then there's a great library called 3JS. And the nice thing about that library is that there's just a ton of examples and documentation. And so people who are new to 3D programming can go and look and sort of do the great thing where you download a working example and then you just start futzing around and changing variable names to make things happen. So those are kind of the two paths. If you're a developer who is interested in the standard itself, there is the Immersive Web Community Group. Just people go and take a look and just get a sense of the ideas that are flowing around in the community. Every day I find a new conversation going on about some aspect of the future that I find really exciting.
Yeah. Now, Mozilla also has an experimental browser for the AR side, right?
We have an app in the iOS store that's called the WebXR viewer. And it is basically a portal mode app. So it runs on a device that you hold in your hand and you look through like this. And it uses the iOS capabilities of environment mapping and device position tracking to let people write web pages that show augmented reality applications. So that's something that the AR side of the mixed reality team at Mozilla put together to experiment so that people could try out new APIs. It led to a lot of sort of experimentation that informed us on how the WebXR device API should be formed.
Right. Is there an equivalent for Android?
You can actually use mobile Chrome and turn on a flag for both WebXR and some experimental AR features that do things like let you do what's called hit testing, which is when you're holding the device, if you tap on the device, it can basically shoot a ray and figure out if the thing under your finger is a surface or something that it's detected. And if so, then the app can put something on that surface.
I can imagine in a year or two when all this stuff is stabilized and shipped that we'll have some really interesting applications.
For sure. And then on the other side of the house at Mozilla, we have Firefox Reality, which is it's for the Android platform, but it's designed to run in the standalone headsets like the Go or the Mirage Solo, and then the Vive Focus is another target. And so that right now, the initial versions are all focused on VR, but as we get down the road and there are headsets that are see-through AR glasses, Firefox Reality will also target those platforms.
Now, can I get Firefox Reality today?
You can, if you're willing to manually install an APK to your phone. Kind of a laborious, annoying process. Yeah, so you have to sideload it. It's not in the app stores yet.
Well, thank you for joining me.
Gosh. Thank you for putting this together. Yeah, I love talking about it. I could talk about it for days. All right.
Thank you, Trevor. Bye.